Well, I welcome you back to the Advanced Squad Leader Training video series. This is your host, ID Jester. Today we're going to talk about some of the terminology used of the different states your vehicle can be in and some of the terminology that's used throughout the rule book, and a lot of it is rather confusing. Whether or not you're in motion, are you moving, are you stopped or non-stopped? Are you a moving vehicle? All these things can be rather confusing because motion and moving all kind of refer to the same thing, although in the Advanced Squad Leader system they mean different things. So before we actually look at some of the different phases and the different states your vehicle can be in, let's go through some of the definitions so we understand what they mean and the best way that they relate to the different phases of the game. First of all, definitions: are you moving? When you ask yourself, are you moving? That is, are you the current attacker and in your movement phase? And you're currently spending movement points to activate your vehicle. So simply put, are you spending movement points on a specific counter? That counter is then moving. You're actually moving the counter on the map board. That is, now you are moving that counter. You're moving that vehicle. By spending movement points, you're the current attacker, and in your current, you are in your current movement phase. The next question you need to think about and relate to is, are you in motion? And basically the definition that I give for you in motion is a vehicle that ends its movement phase. Ends its movement phase and without spending its last movement point to stop. So it doesn't spend its last movement point to stop. Now again, notice it's the last movement point, so if you move a vehicle, stop, move it, and stop, move it, and stop, and then you move it again, but then you choose not to stop, then your vehicle is going to be considered in motion. So the most important thing is going to be this last movement points of your vehicle. And we'll show you that when we get to the flow chart here a little bit later. As a note, that last movement point to stop can be followed by any number of delay movement points. It can be followed by any number of delay movement points. The vehicle that doesn't spend any movement point to stop will get a motion counter put on top of it and will remain in motion until its next movement phase. Will remain in motion until the next movement phase, of course, unless something comes along and destroys it or causes it to stop moving. Next question you have to ask yourself, are you non-stopped? Non-stopped. So a non-stopped would be a vehicle that is currently spending movement points and does not spend a movement point to stop. So you're non-stopped by not spending your last movement point. The last movement point you spent isn't to stop, or once you spend a movement point to stop, it's not a delay movement point. And as of note, you are either stopped or you are non-stopped, one or the other. There's no in between. You can't be both. It's either one or the other. And last but not least, are you a moving vehicle? Are you a moving vehicle? So when we talk about are you a moving vehicle would be a vehicle that has moved to a new hex or hex side during the movement phase, even if it's currently stopped or immobilized. And even if you're currently stopped, it remains a moving vehicle until the end of their turn. Or it'll remain a moving vehicle until the next movement phase if the vehicle stays in motion. And you'll see how all these come into play a little bit later. One thing of note, though, you might want to think, are you a moving vehicle? You can also think of that as, are you a moving target? I've seen some information posted online, some of the wonderful posts out there, Board Game Geek, and some of the information, if you read through it, Some of them suggest that maybe instead of thinking of it as a moving vehicle, you might think of yourself as a moving target. Are you a moving vehicle? Can also be, are you a moving target? A moving vehicle, again, once you move to a new hex or hex side, you're going to remain a moving vehicle until the end of your turn. If you don't spend any movement point or your last movement point to stop, then you're going to be considered a moving vehicle until the start of your next movement phase. Let's see how all this comes into play now in our flow chart. Alright, very simply, in the prep fire phase, we have a British tank here. I decided to go with the British ones because I'm getting sick of seeing the American and the German ones all the time. So I thought I'd try something different. We'll go ahead and try a British tank this time, but this British tank could represent any kind of vehicle out there. When we start our prep fire phase, we notice, are we moving? No, we're not moving because we're not spending movement points on it. Are we in motion? No, we're not in motion because we don't have a motion counter on it. Are we non-stopped? No, we are stopped. So no, we are non-stopped. That could be kind of confusing. Are you a moving vehicle? No, you can see we have no motion. We haven't spent any movement points to move it, so no. So the action we're going to take simply is we're going to prep fire. In the prep fire phase, vehicle shoots all of his main armament, his machine guns, whatever. He takes all of his prep fire actions at the end of the prep fire phase. Simply put, are you moving? No. Are you in motion? No. Are you non-stopped? No. Are you a moving vehicle? No. Same reasons that we applied at the start of the phase, same reasons we have at the end of the phase. The bigger confusion comes into play when we're actually talking about the movement phase. This is where a lot of confusion can come into play, whether we're starting our vehicle, stopping our vehicle, etc., etc. Well, let's look at what can happen here. In the start of the prep fire phase, start of the movement phase. Are we moving? No, we are not moving because we haven't actually spent any movement points on this vehicle yet. Are we in motion? No, we're not in motion because we haven't got a motion counter on it. Are we non-stopped? No, we are stopped, so no, we are non-stopped. Are we a moving vehicle? No, obviously we haven't spent any movement points to move, so no. So the action we're going to take, we're going to spend a movement point. We spend one movement point to start. When we do that, what happens to our current state of the vehicle? You notice several things change. First thing that changes is, are we moving? Yes. The definition, remember the definition, it's our movement phase. We're spending movement points on it, so yes, we are now moving. Are we in motion? No, we are not in motion because we don't have a motion counter. Are you non-stopped? Yes, we are non-stopped. We are considered non-stopped by spending a movement point to start. But notice, are we a moving vehicle? No, we are not a moving vehicle. We're not moving at this point, but we are non-stopped. This one can get a little confusing. Just think through it. Replay the video a couple times. Hopefully it'll start to sink in and you'll start to think about these things, the different phases your tank can be in. Alright, so now that we have actually started our vehicle, all we're going to do is follow our flowchart. We're going to take that information, bring it over here on the left hand side. Notice this information is exactly the same. The next thing we're going to do with this is we're going to move into another hex. We're going to move into another hex. We've spent a movement point to start a vehicle. Now we're going to move into another hex. You notice all of a sudden we're going to have some different things, different state of our vehicle. Are we moving? Yes. Again, we're still spending movement points on it. Are we in motion? No, because we don't have a motion counter. Are we non-stopped? Yes, we are non-stopped. And now that we've moved into another hex, we now classify ourselves as a moving vehicle. So yes, we are now a moving vehicle. Alright, so we're just going to take this information, bring it down here on the left hand side, and we're going to follow along and do their next action. Next action can be moving into another hex, or we can come to a stop in another hex, and then in parentheses we could shoot if we wanted to, depending on our action. Let's assume we come to a stop in another hex. Once we do that, you notice our current state of our vehicle changes. Are we moving? Yes, we are moving because we're spending movement points on it. We just spent a movement point to stop. Are we in motion? No, we are not in motion because we don't have a motion counter on it. Are we non-stopped? No, in fact we are stopped. So no, we are no longer non-stopped. Our last movement point we just spent was to come to a stop. And are we a moving vehicle? Of course, we still classify ourselves as a moving vehicle because we still have the same definition. We've moved into another hex. We're still a moving vehicle, even though we have stopped. Remember again, you can look at are you a moving vehicle? Think of that also as are you a moving target? And then you just follow the flowchart along. Once we stop, we can then come back up here and go through the start process again, moving into another hex again, stopping again, doing it several times, back and forth, just follow through the flowchart. The most important thing is, once you come down to the very end, is whether or not you have one of two choices. You can either A, your last action you're going to take is to spend a movement point to stop, followed by any number of delay movement points. So if I spend a movement point to stop and then I spend 10 delay movement points, it's just like I had spent one movement point to stop. So as long as your stop is your last movement point you spend, other than delay movement points, you're going to have a certain state for your vehicle. Are you moving? No, because we're no longer going to be spending movement points on that vehicle, so it's no longer moving. Are we in motion? No, we are not in motion because we don't have a motion counter. Are we non-stopped? No, we are stopped, so we are not non-stopped. And then finally, are we a moving vehicle? Even though we spent a movement point to stop again, we are still considered a moving vehicle. So yes. The other option with the last movement point you have is to decide not to spend it to stop. So if we spend our end our movement phase without spending our last movement point to stop, and again when I'm talking about the last movement point, I'm talking about the last movement point before any delay movement points. So if you spend your last, if you don't spend your last movement phase, if you don't spend your last movement point in the movement phase without spending it to stop, then this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a motion counter. You're going to get a motion counter, and you notice a lot of differences between whether you continue to stop or you don't choose to stop. Many differences between the different states of your vehicle. Are we moving? No, we're no longer moving because we're no longer spending movement points on it. So we're not moving that counter anymore. We're done with that counter. So are we moving? No. Are you in motion? Yes, we are in motion. Notice the only time we've had yes so far is when we have a motion counter. So when you have a motion counter on your vehicle, you are in motion. Are you non-stopped? Yes, we are non-stopped. We're in motion. So yes, we are non-stopped. And are we considered a moving vehicle? Yes, of course. We are still considered a moving vehicle. So again, you can follow through the flow chart, stopping, starting your vehicle, moving into other hexes, coming to a stop to take shots. You can see that based on your different actions you take, certain different states your vehicle can be in, whether you're moving, whether you're in motion, whether you're non-stopped or stopped. So we talked a little bit about that when you start your turn not in motion. So let's see how that affects how things look when you start your turn in motion. So let's look at how that affects things. If you start the current prep fire phase with a motion counter on your vehicle, are you moving? No, not moving because we're not spending movement points on it. Are you in motion? Yes, we are in motion because we have a motion counter. Are you non-stopped? Obviously yes, because we are moving. Are you a moving vehicle? Yes, we are considered a moving vehicle. Notice the action you can take, none allowed. You cannot spend any movement points in the prep fire phase on that vehicle. So no actions are allowed. So you can see you're going to start the prep fire phase and end the prep fire phase in the same state. Now, you have one of two choices when you start your movement phase in motion. If you start your current motion, if you start the movement phase in motion, so are you in motion? Are you moving? No, because we haven't spent any movement points on it yet. Are you in motion? Yes, we are in motion because we have the motion counter. Are you non-stopped? Of course we are. Are you a moving vehicle? Yes, we are a moving vehicle. So one of the two actions we can take is either to move or to stop. So if we move our vehicle from one hex into another hex, or rotate it from one hex spine to another hex spine, how does that affect our vehicle? Well, all of a sudden you notice, are we moving? Yes, because we just spent movement point. We just spent a movement point to move it, either into a new hex or to a new hex side. Are we in motion? No. Notice we lose our motion counter. We are no longer considered in motion. Are you non-stopped? Yes, we are non-stopped because we are moving. And I guess I shouldn't use the term moving because you might think when I say moving, you're referring to one of the other movement options. So that's how it can be rather confusing. In this case, I guess just to say, are we non-stopped? Yes, we are non-stopped because we haven't spent our last movement point to stop. And are we considered a moving vehicle? Yes, we are, because we just spent a movement point to move either a hex spine or into a new hex. The other option, if you start the current phase, the current movement phase with the motion counter, obviously another one of your options could be to come to a stop. If you come to a stop, notice what happens. You're going to lose your motion counter. Are you moving? Yes, we are moving because we're now spending movement points. So we just spent a movement point to stop. Are we in motion? No, we're no longer in motion because we lost our motion counter. Are you non-stopped? No, because we actually spent a movement point to stop. We are stopped. We are not non-stopped. Are you a moving vehicle? Yes, we are a moving vehicle because we have started in motion and now we will be considered in motion. We will be considered a moving vehicle until the end of our turn. Then we're just going to simply take our actions just like we did up on the top part of the sheet, and we're going to go through them and we're going to come back to our last action taken options is below. The thing of note to keep in mind is once you start spending movement points, if you start your current movement phase with a motion counter, when you start spending movement points on it, you lose the motion counter. You are now moving the vehicle. When you're moving the vehicle, you're not in motion anymore. So once we start spending movement points, whether that's to stop, whether that's to stop the vehicle or to move the vehicle, we start doing that. We lose our motion counter, and then we simply go back up to our first sheet here. We start spending our movement points and following along the flow chart, moving in other hexes, coming to a stop, spending movement points to start, spending movement points to move into another hex, maybe stopping again. And then finally, when we come to the very end, we've got to decide whether or not we're going to spend our last movement point to stop, followed by any number of delay movement points, or we are not going to spend our last movement point to stop, and we will stay in motion, and then we'll get to start the process all over again. So quickly, if we go through our definitions one more time, they might make a little more sense now that we've had a chance to see how the different states of our vehicle happen. Are we moving? Well, remember, for the current attacker, it's our movement phase. We're spending movement points on the vehicle. Then we are moving the vehicle. Okay, whether we're rotating it, we're moving it from hex to hex, we're spending movement points to start and stop the vehicle. We are actually spending movement points on that counter, on that vehicle. So we are in the process of moving it. Are we in motion? Okay, the thing to remember about motion, motion's only going to happen at the very end of your turn and in between your turns. So at the very end, if we stay in motion, okay, we stay in motion, we're going to stay all the way in motion until our next movement phase. And then it'll stay in motion until we get into that next movement phase. And when we start spending movement points on that vehicle, then our motion counter goes away. So we can't be in motion and be spending movement points on that vehicle. So it's one or the other. So motion, basically, if you see a motion counter on the vehicle is in motion. Anytime you decide not to spend movement points to stop the vehicle, you're going to get a motion counter. That motion counter stays with you. And as soon as you start spending movement points on that vehicle, the motion counter gets removed. Are you non-stopped? Are you non-stopped? So basically, did you spend your last movement point, the last one you just spent? Was it to stop the vehicle, or was it a delay movement point after spending a movement point to stop? If it was, then you are not non-stopped. If you spend a movement point to do anything but delay or stop, I should say delay after you stop. If you spend any movement point other than delay or a delay after a stop, then you are considered non-stopped. So starting a vehicle, starting it up, it's a movement point, it's not a stop movement point, and it's not a delay movement point after a stop movement point. So starting a vehicle up means you are no longer stopped, you are non-stopped. And last but not least, are you a moving vehicle? A moving vehicle, once you move into a new hex or hex side during the movement phase, all you have to do is move into a new hex or new hex side. You're going to remain a moving vehicle till the end of your turn. And if you don't spend any movement points to stop, you're going to remain a moving vehicle until the start of your next movement phase, because you're going to be staying in motion. So hopefully now that you understand some of the different states a vehicle can be in, the different actions you can take to adjust the state they're in, notice that once you start moving the vehicle and you are considered a moving vehicle, you're going to stay that way no matter what other action you take. You notice it, yes, 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 yes. And even if I stop the vehicle, and even if I don't stop the vehicle, once I get yes on my moving vehicle, then it's going to stay that way. And then the big decision at the end is whether or not to stay in motion or not to stay in motion. Okay, it should be noted that you can go in motion in your defensive phase. So you might be able to you might be able to stop your vehicle at the end of your movement phase, and then in your defensive fire phase you might decide to go into motion to do a motion attempt roll to see if you can get that motion counter put on your vehicle, on your counter. And then when you do that, you're going to start with the motion counter, and you're going to have different aspects of starting the current state of your vehicle. And then when you start spending movement points on your vehicle, you're going to lose that motion counter in your movement phase. Also remember that in your prep fire phase, if you start in motion, you can't do anything with your vehicle. So hopefully this is kind of informative, and it might take you a little while to understand the different phases, the different states of the vehicle, motion, non-motion, stopped, non-stopped. Are you a moving vehicle? So you're not a moving vehicle until you qualify for it, and once you qualify for a moving vehicle, then you're going to be considered a moving vehicle. So that'll come into play when we look at our different charts, our different fire base hit determination die roll modifiers. Motion, C4. So you know motion now. If you're firing and you're in motion, it means you got a motion counter on you. If you're non-stopped firer, okay, non-stop firer, so that could be somebody that started their vehicle but not have moved out of the hex yet, so non-stop firer. Moving vehicular target, so it's considered a moving vehicular target. They're spending movement points on it. They're spending movement points on it. Again here, point blank, NA if non-stopped. So if they're non-stopped, you don't get that. And if there's motion, so if there's a motion counter on the fire or the target, one or the other, you won't get point blank range. So feel free to watch this video, try to understand the different phases. They should have used some different terminology that might have helped. Think of, instead of are you a moving vehicle, think of it as are you a moving target. It might help clear up some of that information. Follow along through the flow chart. If you start your phase with a motion counter, you're going to start in a different state than you would without a motion counter. When you start spending movement points, whether it's to move or to stop your vehicle, you're going to lose that motion counter. When you lose that motion counter, then all of a sudden you're a moving vehicle again because you're spending movement points on it. Well, hopefully this is informative. Hopefully you get some of the definitions down. Hopefully you can understand the different states that the vehicle can be in and how the different states relate to the different phases, and how the different actions you take can affect the different states that you can possibly be in. Well, I hope this video was informative and interesting, and hopefully I did a good job of explaining it. It's very hard to try to explain motion and non-motion and stopped and non-stop, moving and non-moving vehicles when somebody thinks of motion and non-stopped and moving vehicle all as the same thing. Unfortunately, in ASL, they're not all the same thing, and so you have to understand the differences between them. Well, until the next video comes out, I appreciate you watching. This is the Advanced Squad Leader System training video series, and if you have any thoughts or questions or comments, please do post, and I'll be looking forward to having you back next time. Until then, this is ID Jester signing off.